Welcome back to another episode on the Landscaping Podcast brought to you by Landscaping Unlimited. We are your hosts, Zac and Shay, and we're here to talk to you about whether it is more beneficial to rent, to own, what those circumstances would be. Shay's been talking about this topic for a while now, so I'm going to be more of the facilitator in this one compared to others because I've not really had to worry about this. You know, I kind of use the equipment, but whether we're renting it or we're purchasing it, that's sort of fallen in your world. So how do you make that decision as to when it's more cost beneficial to rent, own, and how do you go about that process as a landscaper and hardscaper?
So first, every company is going to be a little different into this. However, there are some key features that you can use to figure out if it's better for you to rent or to own. For us, one thing that really sticks out is how often you're going to use the machinery. If it's something you're going to use day in and day out, then obviously it makes financial sense to go ahead and purchase that machine so that it's always available to you and you can stay up on all the maintenance of it so that you don't have to worry about the machine breaking down while you're using it. It will be way cheaper in the long run to own it than to rent it. Renting is nice when you don't need something all the time and you want it maybe 2 or 3 times a year. You're a small landscape company and you need a bigger tractor. Well, maybe you need to rent that tractor for one job, but you don't need it for every job. So buying a large tractor, wouldn't help you out there. But if it's something you use all the time, then yes, you need to own it and put it on your assets list and have it in your company that's yours.
So I've got a list of questions that I'm going to pitch as if I were somebody that were getting into this world and trying to figure out how to navigate it best.
Okay.
So the very first one is, would you sell a job that you don't own the equipment for, but if you won the job, you got the bid, you then would factor in, all right, I'm going to rent this piece of equipment with this job?
Yeah, so we've done that a few times. I mean, we've done it where we didn't own the equipment. We bid a job with the intent of if we got that job, then we would buy the equipment. We've also done them where we didn't own and we rented to complete the job. All of that is calculated in on the bidding process side of that. So if it was something that we were going to purchase, then we had to make sure that that contract, as well as any contracts after that, would accommodate that payment, as well as the maintenance and the upkeep and all that stuff. As far as on the jobs where we rented, then you had to make sure that the insurance that you were going to have on that rental equipment, the delivery of the rental equipment to the job, all that's covered in that contract as well. But yes, we've done it both ways, where we've bought equipment after we got awarded the contract where that equipment was needed, and equipment that we need to finish the job. For example, today we've got a roller that we've rented for a job that we need some compaction on in 8-inch lifts, whereas a regular plate compactor that we use on driveways wouldn't quite give us the compaction that we need for an 8-inch lift. We don't do that. We don't do 8-inch lifts that often. So for us, owning that piece of machinery that cost in excess of $50,000 isn't worth sitting around to get rained on and depreciate. Whereas just renting it, you just pass that expense on in the job, and you don't have to worry about the maintenance and the upkeep of it.
So let's say you're working a job, someone else delays the job, causing you to turn your 1-week rental into a 2-week rental. Does that additional cost is that something that you eat as the renter because you were hoping that they got it done on their end on time? Or is that something you tack on at the end saying, hey, you incurred this fee because you made a mistake?
Yeah, so there's that. That is certainly an issue. However, I think as a business, it's not anyone's fault other than you as the bidder. You couldn't control someone else's delaying of the job, just like they can't control that you only rented it for a week, but you needed it for 2. So, it's no one's fault there. I think that comes down to really making sure you've got a good relationship with where you rent from and making sure that when you call them and say, hey, this is when I need it, I'm pretty confident it'll be ready this day and I need it for a week, delivered on this day. Now, if you go and look at the job and it's not progressing the way it should, then you should go ahead and call and say, hey, let's hold that rental up another week if that's okay, because I don't quite need it yet, or the subs that are working in front of me, they're not out of the way, so therefore they're delaying the project. So as a project manager of your company, you should be able to orchestrate that to where you don't have it there when it's not needed. And that's another hassle of renting, because it's a lot more moving parts of making sure that things are there when you need them. However, you can save money if it's not something you use often. But if you use that equipment often, then you wouldn't have to worry about that, because you can move it, transport it around, job to job, and you don't have to worry about, well, they're not quite ready. It's like, okay, well, take the equipment, go do another job, come back when you are ready, and now you keep on moving.
Now, do you find, you mentioned where you get it from and having a working relationship with them. Are there any go-to references or resources rather in Eastern North Carolina that you prefer we rent our equipment from?
Yeah, so we rent a lot from Gregory Pool Cat. They're local to us. The girl that works in there, Angelina, she's super nice, and she's very accommodating every time I have a request, and answers all the questions I have. There's also, Sunbelt. We've done some jobs where we're needing like stump grinders and wood chippers and stuff, and Sunbelt's usually the easier for that. But larger equipment, we usually always go Gregory Pool, just because they have a large inventory and we have an account with them. So it's just easy. I pick up the phone, tell them what I need, where to deliver it to, and she sends me the email to DocuSign. I send it right back, and within about 30 minutes, we've had a whole interaction of telling her what I need, telling her where it's going, signing it, and then boom, it's getting delivered. So that's the easiest for me. If you're in an area where you're next to a United rental or a Sunbelt right down the road, then yeah, that might be best for you. But for us, we tend to lean towards Gregory Pool Cat.
Now, some equipment, you mentioned it being delivered. The heavier equipment, I'm assuming, gets delivered. The lighter things you can go and pick up, correct?
Yes, that's right, yep. Which is another thing, renting versus owning. Sometimes when you start going into these larger pieces of equipment, you start going into, all right, well, we have a need for a 13-ton excavator. Well, guess what? If you've never had equipment that you needed a lowboy for, or you needed a Class A driver for, well, now you do. So not only are you buying the equipment, but now you're buying a truck and a trailer, and you're either getting your CDLs yourself, or you're hiring a CDL driver, or you're going to be paying a transport company to move that machine from job to job. So that's another expense that you have to figure out every time you move your personal equipment. You also figure that into, the rental equipment as well. But when it's your personal stuff, you're looking at it, you have to remember, all right, well, I need the excavator, but how am I going to move it? Or I need the bulldozer, but now I've got to buy a truck and trailer, and I've got insurance, tags, wear and tear on that equipment as well. That's an indirect, purchase from the actual equipment itself.
I think that's actually one of the more important things here too, is when people are looking to make that decision. Maybe they've rented the equipment time and time again. It's like, all right, maybe it's time to invest in this, not just looking at the equipment. Because there's plenty of times I'm like, there's plenty of stuff I could do around my house with an excavator.
Yeah.
Like even just a mini X, you're like, I need this thing, but I don't think about, all right, well, I need the tags. I also need the insurance. Well, I also need to make sure that I've got somewhere to keep fueling it up.
Yep.
I've got to transport it, to other places. And so there's a lot more than just the equipment. And I think that's especially for newer business owners that are kind of mapping their way and starting to make those bigger purchases, to look at the long-term cost and benefits that they're going to make from it. Yep. Some equipment will pay for all those things, because if you're racking up those jobs, it's better to have them.
That's right.
But it's nice to have. And if you get it just for the equipment and all of a sudden there's a surprise $10,000, multi-$1,000 expense associated with it that you didn't see coming, it might not have been as profitable as you once thought.
That's right. And another thing, when you own all of the equipment, then see how I can word this to make the most sense. When you own all of your equipment, but you're not using it all every single day. So some of it's sitting idle, it's sitting under the shelter for, a week or two at a time in between jobs. Your operating expense and your cost of operating, well, it's got to include all the equipment you're not using as well. So your cost of operating may go up, whereas if you rented, your operating cost could probably stay a little bit lower, and then you just pass on that expense on that one particular job, versus needing all of your jobs to cover the expense, of everything you own. However, there are some pros and cons to that, because, the pro to having it all, and yes, your operating expense may be up, but one of the pros is no matter what job you're on, no matter what you run into, it's like, all right, we'll just run back to the shop, call the truck driver, call Box, our truck driver's name is Box, and tell him what you need, and he'll go load it up on the machine, bring it right to you, service it, and all that good stuff. And then boom, next thing you know, you're right back into rolling. There's no delays on the job, but your operating expense goes up. But also eliminate delays because you've got all the equipment. So there's a catch-22 there, and every company has to really draw that line of what side of that line, do I need to be on to make the most money and be the most profitable. And we're guilty of it. Sometimes we buy a lot of equipment that we need. However, sometimes it's like, all right, maybe we could have rented that piece of equipment for another year or two to really justify the use of it rather than going ahead and purchasing it. But at times, it's got us out of a bind where we're doing something and boom, we just go back and get it, come out here and we knock this thing out.
Now, looking at the owning, so let's say you're owning the equipment, is there, and let's not admit to anything illegal because I'm not sure the legalities around it, but are you allowed to rent out your own equipment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if because of the tonnage or because of whatever, do you have to check their certifications to ensure they're allowed to operate?
No. I mean,
I'm not sure how to probably ask that question.
No, I think like as far as like for them hauling it, if they need a CDL or if they need permits, to haul up and down the highway, that's all on them. If they're the ones transporting it, then those tickets are on them. It is your equipment though. So like if you're renting your excavator and they've got their own truck and trailer, you want to make sure that they chain it down because you don't want your excavator on the side of the highway. You want to make sure that you're renting it to people that are taking care of it. You want some form of contract to where they know if they break it or they damage it, that's outside of normal use, that they're going to repair it. Similar to what you would have at any other rental company. But that is one thing you can do with your equipment if you do own it and you don't use it a lot. You can rent it out to other contractors as well. And we've run into that. We actually rent some equipment sometimes when ours are tied up from one of my buddies, and then vice versa. We've got some other buddies that will call and say, hey, I've got a job closer to where you're at. Instead of hauling my machine, 2 hours, can I just borrow your stuff or, rent it from you? And we work that out all the time. But it's usually people we know, not just to the general public, because the general public doesn't care about your stuff.
Yeah. So when you're talking about that and somebody's renting from you that's not a friend or anything, is it a literal written contract? You're like, hey, I need you to sign this because you're on the hook if you bust this thing up?
Yeah, so with us, the times we've done it, no, because we know them personally. So it's always
I've never seen us give it to somebody we didn't know.
Yeah, it's always a good faith. We know they're going to take care of it. And we also know that if they did damage it, that they would repair it and let us know, and there wouldn't be any issues, which ultimately, I wouldn't loan my equipment to anybody I didn't know or rent it to anybody I didn't know, because that equipment is what makes our money day in and day out. If I rent it out to somebody else and they damage it, well, I just shot ourselves in the foot, because what I rented it to you for probably doesn't cover all of the money I lost, on a job I could be using it on.
Yeah. I was thinking about the foundation we were digging out. If you guys haven't seen that video, you should check it out. It's pretty cool. But we dug a giant hole. And it was your buddy's excavator, which was a little bit larger. And seeing what was required for him to transport that to us. That's the first time. Was it called a lowboy?
A lowboy, yeah.
So that's the first time I saw that all used. That was one of the coolest things. Yep. Like he dropped it off because he took off. I was like, "Where's the truck going?" He separated from the trailer for the excavator to get on it. Turn around. I was like, "Oh, that is really cool."
Yep.
But back to our point on relationships, having friends like that, creating a network like that, it allows you to have those opportunities to where we didn't have to haul ours all the way from Washington down to Dowry Creek.
Yep.
We were able to work with others who could transport a little bit easier for what it is we needed to do. And I think that's pretty cool, because it also speaks to the importance of having those friendships and relationships.
Yep, 100%. So renting, when it comes to brands of equipment, it's always a good idea that if you've got the brand that you're looking at buying, to go rent it from those rental companies and test it out and really see if it does what you want it to do. For us, I know that we've ran into an instance where our Toro Dingo TX 1000 had broke down, or was getting some repairs, but we needed to lay 2 track trailers aside the next day. And so we call Gregory Pool. They've also got some Toros, but they didn't have any that day. So we rented the Wacker Newson 100. I can't remember the actual model number because I'm never going to buy one. But we rented that, and everybody that got on it immediately hated it. So
I fell off it.
Yeah.
So, my other guys fell off it.
So as far as brands and stuff like that, renting equipment, it's good to test that stuff out and see which ones you like. I know now that I will never, even if I come across a good deal and I'm like, man, that's a good deal. It's the same weight, lifting capacity, all this stuff that ours is. Well, now I know I won't buy it because even though all the specs match, it did not control the same. And it was the worst experience for our guys laying that sod that day because it took longer than what it should have because nobody liked the machine. So that's one thing there, as well as when you start thinking about the maintenance on things. Mm-hmm. You know, when you own your own stuff, if you do not maintain it, well, guess what? At some point, it's going to break when it shouldn't have broke. We all know equipment breaks and that you're going to have things that happen. That's inevitable. That's the industry that we're in. We abuse everything we use. However, preventative maintenance, where you're changing the oil, you're changing the fluids, you're greasing all the grease fittings, you know, that stuff's preventable. So when the employees call and say, well, the front end loader just fell off and all the bolts are broke, and when you get there, you know, half the bolts on one side are all backed out. It's like, well, did you guys look over the machine this morning? Because it was preventable. You know, if you had checked it, you wouldn't have destroyed this whole tractor.
Yeah, preventative maintenance is far cheaper than corrective maintenance.
Yeah, 100%.
When you can prevent it from and not have to correct it, there's like another comma or a zero added on that corrective side.
Yep. So when you own your own equipment, if you don't have your guys trained on the maintenance side of it, you know, and the I say pre-trip because in CDLs, you know, when you have your CDLs and your truck driver, before you hit the road, you have to do a pre-trip where you walk the truck. You know, you check for things that are broken, messed up. So the same thing with all the equipment, you know, you have that pre-operation checklist where you should be able to walk around and check everything out, check all your fluids, check your air pressures, check your track tension, all that good stuff. And if your guys don't do that or you don't train them to do that, then you're asking yourself to have a much higher corrective.
Corrective expense?
Yeah, you're gonna have a much higher corrective expense. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. So that's important to think about when you own your own stuff. Whereas when you rent it, you know, if you're renting it for a short period of time, yeah, you're supposed to grease all of the grease fittings daily. It's big sticker on the side of the machine. You're supposed to check all the fluids. You know, you're supposed to do all that. However, 99% of the time when you rent equipment, it's coming to you in good working condition. It's not broke when you get it. We've had instances where the guys were working so fast, job to job to job, that all the preventative maintenance got skipped. And so we'd get to another job where we need it, and we get there, and next thing you know, we got hydraulic leak. The bushings for the bucket on the skid steer, you know, were all the bolts that hold them in were gone because they didn't grease them. And so it's like, cool, now I've got to fix all this before we can actually work. Whereas sometimes when you rent, usually all that stuff's done because I know Gregory Pool Caterpillar is really good at it. They'll send their tech to all the equipment before it goes out and make sure everything's good. So you're usually starting out on a good note. And yes, if you own your own equipment, you should also be starting out on a good note because you should be doing preventative maintenance. However, in this industry, it's always go, go, go. So if you're listening to this and you're in the industry, then you know what I mean when I say that.
This is your reminder, though. This is also your reminder. Go check your stuff.
That's right.
Go grease it up.
That's right. Because an engine with no oil in it will be an engine with a hole in it.
Nice tagline there. All right. Have you ever, all right, let me ask this. What is the most difficult piece of equipment that you've rented that you thought would be easy to operate, and when you got it, you're like, this is far more complicated than I thought?
I don't know. They've all operated pretty simple to what I thought they would. I mean, the roller we just rented the other day, there was one switch that if I didn't have that one switch flipped the right way, I couldn't get the roller to vibrate. And every roller I had ever used before that didn't have that switch. So after about 15 minutes of pressing all the buttons, I figured that part out. But all of the equipment I've ran or rented has always been pretty straightforward as to how it operates.
I was thinking about the wood chipper.
Oh yeah,
getting that just to get it started and then figuring out how to properly like feed it. That would drive me crazy because I felt like it should be the other one that we have is very simple. Put it in and it destroys it.
Yeah,
nothing's going to save you, but put it in, it destroys it. You know, on this one there were so many things that were safety levers and everything on the where your hip goes, where your hands go, everything. That I was like, why isn't it working?
Yeah,
and it's like we don't have time to sit and read through a manual.
Yep.
So that when we rented that, I thought it was going to be very easy, and I was so frustrated at the beginning because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't running.
Yeah, that wood chipper was the one exception of when I said most of the time they come to you ready to go. Yeah, that one wasn't ready to go. So we ended up having to work on that one quite often. But most of the time when you rent, usually you don't have to worry about that. However, you also have to be careful that if you're renting stuff that the general public, like the size of equipment that the general public would normally rent, they don't care either than they've never used that equipment. So they're more abusive on it too. And so when it goes back, sometimes things get skipped and missed. And it ends up getting rented out to you broken the way that the general public returned it and didn't tell anybody. So I would say, like, if you use a United rental or a Gregory Pool, most of the time those people are renting to contractors. And so it's people that are already familiar with the equipment. They just either don't have enough or they don't use that piece, one particular item, enough to purchase their own. But they're usually operators that are skilled and take care of the stuff and don't abuse it to the point of no end.
I think it's a good in and out of renting and owning. Is there anything else you think that the landscape, hardscape business owner should consider or think about or keep in mind when renting or owning equipment to help complete their job?
So definitely run the numbers. I mean, if you can look at it and go, all right, I can purchase it and increase my operating expense by, X number of dollars or percentage, and you can make it work, then owning 100%, I'm a huge advocate for that, because for one, it goes on your assets list. You increase the value of the company, and you increase, what your company's worth as far as selling. So
as well as depreciation, which you can write off.
Yeah, that's right. So like, it's got its pros, but it also has its cons, because you're going to spend a lot more money in grease, a lot more money in hydraulic filters and oil filters and stuff like that. However, if you're using it enough, then that stuff should flip and make it worth your while. But that's where you as a business owner have to sit down, run the numbers, and see if it makes sense for you. Every company's different. There's no playbook for this is the key to success. If there was, I would have a copy of it and I wouldn't struggle as much as I do. And I think everybody else in the world would read that same book and we would all make it happen. But there's no one set of rules that fits every company, particularly in our industry, because where we're at, in the region, where we're at in the state, all that stuff has a play in all that.
Look at all the companies. It is as unique as your fingerprint.
Oh,
so like what you're going to need is what you're going to need, and so just take the overall theme, the overall message of everything that was said today. Also, today's your last day to get into the giveaway for the fire and water feature. So make sure you jump on that. If you're interested in getting yourself a free fire or water feature, there's a link below. You jump on that and you'll be able to access all the information, answer all the questions you could possibly have. We've got a frequently asked questions section on there. So check that out if you have any questions. But if they're not answered, hit us up. And then tomorrow we'll be doing our drawing. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode on the Landscaping Podcast.